it appears as if they acted first and then thought. It's not so. To respond to both of you as well as this, see, the purposes are different. The IT Act is a control measure to control what is happening on the internet. The cyber security policy, on the other hand, has a different purpose. And there are events overtaking the government. In other words, cyber warfare became a major threat. The shutting down of your IT infrastructure was a major threat, and therefore they are trying to evolve a policy. But as they evolve the policy, more events are overtaking them. So if you look at what the cyber security policy does, it looks at IT infrastructure, primarily government infrastructure like defense, finance, railways, aircraft, and so on. So it is addressing a totally different segment of the cyberspace. The IT Act, on the other hand, tries to take in some amount of the corporate world, but primarily directed towards controlling what's happening on the internet and social media space. Now, the internet was not developed as an open architecture at all. It was an accidental child of the ARPANET, and it just caught on. So it is an uncontrolled world, and governments are not trying to control it, but extremely difficult.
And for the government agencies or departments to function, it's not like
Protecting infrastructure.
yes, for protecting, let's even call it critical infrastructure. It is not like critical infrastructure has functioned so far without policies in place. So those were very well part of it. In fact, predominantly the this sector, internet, and every aspect of it, or should I say, make it even more broad-based and say technology and most aspects of it, have developed substantially through self-regulation. So regulation, self-regulation, or policy-driven regulation, whether it has been imposed or self-implemented, have been in place. Today, when you come out with a policy like this, you have to take this and test it on the angle of what was existing to see whether this is crisper or more, whether it is addressing some issue which has not been addressed earlier. So, no, you will have to be then more specific on that, because when you compare it.
Let us say either a group of individuals, an individual, or a corporate entity in India is collaborating with some entity outside to attack your cyber infrastructure. There was nothing in India which could cater to such a situation. So this policy specifically addresses such issues, making it, criminal or making it and trying to even prevent it. So
yeah, we are going to kind of like park this issue till Apar shares his view. And before we do that, in case Vikram, you need to rush, thank you so much for a very interactive and live session.
Thank you.
New to you all, you already have, benefited from his wisdom from some sessions he has taken over here, I believe. Apar, a topper, nothing I have even aspired to Apar, on an aside. In his LLB, has done his master's from Columbia Law School. He has authored a book on Information Technology Act. We have shared the days on other sessions also on information technology. Apar, please do share your views on the policy.
Okay.
And then we'll open it up.
Okay. Before commenting on the policy itself, I'd just like to give a small disclaimer. Do not reflect the views of my employer or any clients in the sector, and that's specifically due to the fact that when the draft was opened up, I have sent in comments on behalf of a civil society group. Now, even though my personal views may mirror them, and in certain respects they depart from it. Now, just to pick up from the question which was being raised as to the chicken egg one, why did we come up with this policy after we have enactment, and whether there's an actual need for it. I would say yes, there is a need for a cybersecurity policy, and it comes through quite clearly in its annexure, which lists about 12 government institutions which are key stakeholders in critical government infrastructure. Now, what's happening right now is that you have government infrastructure and you have sectoral regulations which are in place with it, and there's no uniformity. At the same time, I would say the way the cybersecurity policy, and I'm commenting on the draft because I do not have the notified version, none of us do. So the way the draft does go about it is not the best way possible, and that's a lot of the blame for that actually lies because there's an absence of precision, and there's actually an absence of what cybersecurity itself is. So there are a lot of definitional issues in it. And to a large extent, I believe it's also built up by a narrative which is continuously peddled at us that we are under a grave threat, and one day the hackers are going to come and shut off our country with a master switch. So, for instance, if you read a press report in the Times of India on May 16, 2013, it screams a headline called "Internet-enabled cars a threat to cybersecurity." And if you read the actual text itself, it comes out of a study and a questionable source from, according to a report by Stuff.co.New Zealand, a new office within the agency will research upon the vehicle electronic safety and analyze the potential cyber attack risks leading to catastrophic accidents. Just notice the kind of hyperbole which is used in this kind of press report, and that too in a leading publication in India. This ties in with ambiguity and appreciation as to what actually constitutes cyber security. During the comments which were sent on the draft cybersecurity policy, I undertook a comparative study of cybersecurity policies which are existent in the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States. And one thing which is uniform across all cybersecurity policies is that they look inwards towards government, firstly. Secondly, they identify critical government infrastructure, which is a higher threshold. And then they seek to place certain technological safeguards with respect to limiting access and to making that environment more secure and sanitized. What it does not do and does not aspire to do is to regulate the private sector. And this is another danger which has been alluded to in former panels, which is, are we seeing another government policy and scheme which will be funded by the taxpayer for the benefit of private corporations to impose standards, to create jobs? In this respect, I'll read another press report this same month on May 1st, 2013, which says cybersecurity to create 5 lakh jobs in India. This is again in the Times of India. India will require 5 lakh cybersecurity professionals by 2015 to support its fast-growing internet economy as per an estimate by the Union Ministry of Information Technology. Now, why is this bad for business if jobs are being created? It's bad for business also because a lot of indigenous firms will need to comply with certification standards which cost money. The ISO certification is not free, it costs money, and it brings down competitiveness and the pricing strategy of Indian companies. So you may not see an individual app developer subscribing to ISO certification voluntarily, and if he is so required to do initially, he may price himself out of the market by itself. Now, let's come to other threat scepters which are raised with regard to the internet and how it will crumble. Another press report which came out in March was, and which was showcased all over television channels, was that the internet is collapsing. Is your internet slow today? And it turned out to be a massive hoax again, carried by reputable publications such as the BBC and the New York Times. And it just turned out to be a hoax again. So what should be the aspiration of a cybersecurity policy? It should look within government, qualify what is critical government infrastructure, and then seek to impose some standards with respect to it. It should also, I think so, build a legal framework. And in terms of a legal framework, what is most striking is that in terms of the Information Technology Act, you already have a provision with respect to notifying government infrastructure as protected systems, and secondly, mandating standards with regard to encryption under section 84A. Encryption, as many of us know, is one very important aspect with respect to cybersecurity. However, the government till now has not even notified rules under it to make this provision effective. And what are we left in the absence of any rules which are notified in this respect? We have certifying authority regulations which state that your encryption bit levels can go up to 2048. You have your telecom licenses which state that you can only use bit encryption levels up to 40 bits. You have the RBI regulations which state that all internet banking transactions carried forward by banks have to subscribe to 128 bits. So you see this vast confusion, sectoral regulations, and a lack of uniformity with respect to encryption by itself. I would say that it is up to the policy by itself to focus on these aspects as opposed to regulating small end users by itself. Also, if you look at the policy, in a lot of respects, it's completely silent with respect to any safeguards which will be put in place and what is the approach in the IT Act by itself. For instance, it's stating that network service providers, which are ISPs, should be proactive. This is a word to notice. Should be proactive in preventing cyber threats. Now, this is clearly contradictory to the inherent passivity and the liability exemptions given to intermediaries under section 79. And going forward, then there are very curious aspects of the policy where it says that small and end home users should not use pirated software because it can lead to a cyber threat to the health of the internet itself. So these aspects clearly do raise suspicion that are we building another grand scheme in the absence of a legislative basis to fund certain certifications which will then be imposed upon on the private sector. Now,